Hello and welcome to Security and Secure, hosted by me, Johnny Seifert. This is the Celebrity Mental Health Podcast, or I says okay to not be okay. And whether you're watching on YouTube or listening on Spotify or Apple Music, wherever you're listening, click that subscribe button, leave a 5-star rating and a review, and let's keep spreading the word. It's okay to not be okay. Now let me tell you about my guest today. My guest today is one of our favourite comedians and debate panellists in the UK. You've seen him everywhere, on Times Radio, on the Jeremy Vine Show. He's everywhere, talking about politics, but in a different way. And it's when he brings out his new book, The British Book Decoded, that I went, hold on a minute. Whether you are a man yourself, or you've got a brother or an uncle or a dad, you need to read this as a Bible to understand the validation and the typifications of what it means to be a British bloke today. And I'm delighted he joins me to talk about the mental health themes of being a guy. It's Geoff Norcott. Hello, mate. I want to start by talking about your mum, if that's okay, because it's quite interesting. In your book, you talk about how she grew up in the care system. And I wonder how that set the bar for what you went through in your childhood based on her experiences. So how was your childhood with that in mind?
She didn't have like a family life in her early life. And I suppose people typically can either kick or conform to what they knew in their childhood. So she could either have been very closed and not sought attachments, or the opposite, which was to hold things very close. So she was very loving, very involved, very engaged. Also, definitely had abandonment issues, I think, which is understandable. And so she's quite an intense mother, but she also came at it with like a blank slate as well. So she instigated her own style of parenting, almost kind of just tore up the blueprint and went her own way. She was a bit of a maverick, I suppose, is the best way of putting it.
So you didn't feel suffocated of she was trying to make up that she didn't have certain aspects in her childhood that she kind of put onto you, that you had to be so family focused?
Like a lot of mums do. She made me a little man, and we were definitely very, very close. So I was certainly a massive mummy's boy, in the early years. I didn't play any sport or anything. It was actually weird. I think she kind of worked that out. We moved to a council estate when I was about 9 or 10, and then I think we both decided that I wasn't anywhere near manly enough. So I started I went and started playing football. I was sought out a football team. And if anything, she then she went the other way. She was like, right, you got to do what you got to do. Boys will be boys, all that sort of stuff. So yeah, I think she got to a point where perhaps, because, with a divorce, with a difficult marriage, she definitely tried to hold us both very close throughout all of that. But I also think that when things improved, she sort of loosened the reins as well.
Well, that's why it's really interesting that you were 9 years old when this happened. And seeing your parents go through a divorce at that age where you're still very much a boy, it's not even like you've got any real identity. And so not having that constant male role model in your council estate in Wimbledon, growing up, going, dad's come home from work, I can see him, and whether he's got the newspaper or the whiskey out or etc., or he's doing the housework. How did you find that navigation as that young boy of going, well, do I want to be a boy playing football because I've got no one to look at to think, is that the right thing to do?
Well, my dad wasn't very sporty. It was a very strange thing on the Norcott side of the family. I once asked him his hobby, and he said mortgages. He was very, very straight down the line guy. But then when we moved to the council estate, it wasn't that long before my stepdad moved in, and he was a solid, grafter of a man. Worked really hard, like backbreaking manual work. He's a removal guy. So yeah, it wasn't long where I didn't have that, and actually that was good continuity in a way. It happened quite quick, I guess, which was complicated in some respects emotionally, but we weren't growing up buck wild sort of thing. There was a 2-tier discipline system within the house. And my dad was around. I mean, where we moved to was only maybe not even half a mile from where my dad lived, so we could walk over there and stuff like that. So I think that, the divorce was stressful, but my parents handled aspects of the continuity pretty well, really. They weren't acrimonious. Well, not in front of us.
Yeah. And then obviously picking it up more in recent times, you lost your mum in 2009. It was 14 years ago now. What were the lessons she taught you in that time between being that council boy, little Geoff, to the Geoff that, those last thoughts you had with her?
I think that she was very much like live for the moment. Her and my dad were like polar opposites. My dad was, and this is a big part of my personality, is work hard, get a bit of money, take care of your responsibilities, provide, all that sort of stuff. which is really important, I think. But she was also like live for the day. You know, she epitomised the other side of it. She never really liked having money in a way. If she had like a bit of extra cash, she would just spend it. She just couldn't, for some reason, you know, being comfortably in a comfortable financial position, it was odd to her, and maybe that was because of her own childhood. So I think that, you know, the loving side of things, I think I took on, and I'm quite, you know, family orientated as well. I enjoy, you know, it's weird. I mean, you can stereotype too much about class, but loads of middle class people I know, they really see seeing their family as a chore. Like it really does their head in, you know. Whereas I really gobble all that up, and maybe it's because the family gatherings we had are always noisy and funny and you know, and vibrant. You know, it's not that thing of us sitting there all silently nursing grievances. My family were always very indiscreet, almost. You know, with what we would discuss. So you know, there's not many of us left now. A very small family, but I do seek out. I did always seek that out whenever I could.
What do you think it's also the fact that you've not got an option? So whereas you might have the white middle class male who goes to work in the city of London and he works from, I don't know, 7 a.m. to 7 p.m. and he comes home after drinks with the boys at the pub after work and basically would eat his dinner and go to bed or play football or whatever. Whereas because of the career path that you went down as a jobbing comedian, having to be on the road, having to go from gig to gig, and you might be doing 2 gigs a day, that family time is more important to you because you have that option to have family time, which they don't because they're working, and yet you're choosing to have the money side because you've got that hard work in grafting. You're going, I've got to make as much money as possible in this amount of time.
Yeah, I think that one of the weird things about comedy is that people, you know, friends have often said to my wife, like, "Oh, it must be so awful with him being away all the time and this, that, and the other." And the truth is, mostly I get home, you know, after tour shows. And mostly, last 4 weeks have been a bit of an exception. It's been tricky, but mostly I get back. And actually, the other side of that is as you rightly say, if a bloke goes and does a job where he doesn't get into like 6, 7, kids are in bed by 8:30, you know, like that time for what it's worth is not a huge amount of time, especially if he's getting an early train or he's going out to work. So where I have been around, I've been around during the week, you know, and I can do the drop off at school, to pick up and stuff like that. So it comes out as kind of cost neutral, maybe. The only thing is the impact on the weekends, perhaps. But even then, you know, if where I'm gigging is not too far away on a Friday and a Saturday night, you can kind of do, you know, take them to a kid's party or inflate a bounce or soft play, you know, 11 a.m. on the Saturday and still have a little bit of a nap before you hit the road. But I do think the one thing now, you know, for dads and blokes generally is that that capacity to be more engaged, right? You know, with being a father. I mean, one thing I have started to think, and I didn't do a chapter about this in the book, but I might write an article on it, is the have it all dads. We're always told about have it all mums, you know, or she works and, you know, but she's there for all the things the kids need. I know an increasing number of my mates that are sort of, you know, really stretched because they are in that white heat of being in your 40s and early 50s and trying to make your mark, but also wanting to be there for all the recitals, all the dances, all the gymnastics and all that sort of stuff. So you don't, you know, whereas back in the old days, they go, leave me alone, I'm just going to sit in a room drinking Guinness, you know, or I'll just stay in bed and just be distant from the house. We're sort of trying to do both, and it's great, but it's kind of knackering as well.
Well, that's you as a father and a son. I suppose the third part is obviously you being a husband, 20 years married next year to your wife, Emma. I suppose that thing of what those lessons she taught you of what she needs in a husband has probably made that idea for you of I've got to go to the recitals, I've got to go to gymnastics, because that's what she was looking for in the husband, in that version of Geoff that she wanted, which is what that role I suppose I'm playing up to now.
I think because of my family, it was also there in me. I think what she has done is she sort of prodded me to be more engaged with my family. There is that thing about blokes where if you're lucky enough to marry a good woman, you sort of think, well, she's great. She knows about whose birthday is when. She knows what all the names of all the kids are, you know. Because there is this thing that once people start having kids, beyond the second one, you're like, I can't keep up with the names, you know. So we're not always on top of the details of our own lives. And I remember a few years ago, she was like, well, I've got a very big family. You've got a very small family. You have to send the birthday cards and Christmas cards for all your friends and family, you know, which is like, you want to talk about feminism. That is radical feminism, I would say. Because feminism often talks at like smashing the glass ceilings, often in terms of power and remuneration and money and stuff. But actually, the things that really blight women's lives on a day-to-day basis is the care responsibilities. So she was basically saying, that's your family, you do it. And at first, obviously, I whinged and moaned, maybe even cried a bit. I'm now glad that I do that, because I think it means something. It means something to the people that I care about, that I'm the one that sends the card. Now, the card might be Moonpig. It's still a thing that I set about doing. I picked a photo, I picked a message, and I sent it. And the truth is, for blokes, is like, we do depend on women a lot for the emotional side of our lives still. But, you don't know what's going to happen down the line. And what you don't want to be is like old and you're just not in tune with the people around you, because that's where you can find yourself lonely and isolated. So it's actually, I think, is the manly thing to do, is to take some responsibility and just take the long view, really, is that bit by bit, if you let your wife do everything in relation to your social life, you won't have a social life. It won't mean anything. You'll just turn up at stuff and you'll just sit quietly and then you'll leave again. So I think that is a really good thing my wife has done.
But do you not think that's also technology coming through? The fact that now it's not the woman walks around stereotypically, obviously, with her diary, with all the kids' arrangements in, whereas now what you can do is you can have WhatsApp groups with your friends, so you can make arrangements yourselves. You've also got shared calendars on your phone. And so you can put in if you're gigging or if you're seeing a friend, and then she can pick it up because you don't have that paper anymore of that one person who's holding that diary.
WhatsApp has been a revelation for blokes, because it allows you to kind of keep up in a light-hearted, fast-moving, it's rolling content effectively, and where, like a serious point made about like one of the lads having to go for a doctor's appointment, and, you're never far away from a joke as well. So it sort of replicates what it's like to be with a group of blokes as well. I think that texting just one-to-one with blokes, it's better than that. I think blokes just phoning each other, we don't do so well with that, because that's always usually time we could be doing something we enjoy, But there's no doubt, if you look at like the issues around male depression, loneliness and suicide, is that something's got to change. I do think that. A lot of the dialogue in the sort of liberal press, it's always men need to be fixed. Men need to basically have a dialogue that's similar to women's. And I think that is alienating for a lot of blokes. They're not ever going to be head-tilting empaths that just go, so, Steve, how are you, Steve? No, how are you really inside, Steve? It's just about how can you tweak the male dynamic between each other to be a little bit more supportive.
It almost sounds like it's not actually the conversations of the issue. It's almost more probably down to the lifestyle. If we think about, and I'm only going by my own experiences, my mum, for example, will always do a 4-day week of work, whereas my dad would always work basically 7 days a week. And I think, yes, you might have your downtime on the golf course, at the football, or at the pub with a friend if you can find the time. But really, the lifestyle between what men are doing, what women are doing, are very, very different. And maybe the answer is for men to kind of take off the reins a little bit more when it comes to work and not see money as the American dream, that we have to have as much money and we have to work every hour as possible.
Yeah, I know what you're saying, but even as you're saying it, I was like, no, gotta work. It's really
because that's ingrained to us. Yeah,
I think it's no bad thing that it's a facet of a good man, is that you want to provide. Your basic primary responsibility, I think, in life, particularly once you're married and or have kids, is to help the household that you're in, survive, prosper, thrive, and anything beyond that. That comes above a lot of other things for me. And you can, I think, in your 40s, you can get a bit lost in it, because that it's sort of like the money shot, isn't it, of whether or not you get somewhere with what you're doing or not. I certainly found that my 40s have been the most stressful bit, really, because a young child, which I've loved being a parent and stuff, but trying to make stuff happen professionally. Particularly at the moment, I do a lot of stuff, write an article, I do a podcast, I do tour shows, I pop up on these news shows, and, a bit for jack of all trades and stuff like that. And individually, all of those things are fine for me to do. I enjoy doing them. But then you think collectively, you just realise that point where your shoulders are up, that defensive posture where you're always prepping for the next thing. I mean, even as something as simple, like, I was on Times Radio at the weekend with Aisha. But, I want to know the subjects that we're going to talk about. I want to have something funny or interesting to say about all of those things. So that demands doing a bit of background reading. And, I don't know if everyone going on the radio or on podcast does that. But I just want to make sure I don't want to have any professional regrets. I don't want to finish doing something, even if it's just popping up down the line on the radio. I don't want to come off and go, oh, that was a bit disappointing, you know. And especially if I was bad because I was bad, fine. But if I was bad because I didn't prepare, that would wind me up.
But do you not think that 30-year-old Geoff, who went through his 30s gigging and putting all the hard work in, is now in the 40s able to take a step back and go, look what I've achieved. I've done everything and now I can enjoy it. I don't need to be putting that hard work. And obviously hard work is important, but also to go, look, I've done the hard bit. The hard bit should be over now. Because I'm, you know, in my 30s, always worrying about savings. How much savings should I have? What does money mean? How much should I spend on holidays? Whereas I thought by your 40s, you'd have basically been able to have those answers now to kind of cruise as a man.
The thing with comedy is very competitive at the moment with social media. People are going from naught to several 100,000, you know, and all of those people, you know, in terms of followers, and all those people then want to tour, you know. So you have to these days do stuff. Whether it, you know, I'm not so hot on the social media, but I pop up on legacy media doing stuff. That's where I choose to be, and you do have to do more to remind people that you're around these days. You know, once upon a time, somebody would do the Royal Variety. They do a season at the end of the pier, you know, happy days, right? Maybe pop up in a Carry On film. That's not an option now. If you're a comic, you've got to be producing content most of the time. It's just how it is now. And I think a lot of comics you'll find will get burnout soon because everyone's trying to do everything. You know, I do the podcast once a week, which I enjoy doing, but it is because you've always got something to flog as well, you know, whether or not it's the book, whether or not it's the tour. And there was a wise guy in comedy who once said to me, like, comedy is like pushing a car up a hill. You know, you can get it really far up that hill, but literally the moment you take your hand off it, it'll go all the way down. And I wish he hadn't said that, but it's kind of true. I suppose, you know, if you are a slightly anxious person like me, you know, or anxious about, you know, money and stuff like that, it probably wouldn't matter where I got to. I would be looking over the brow of the next hill and going, all right, well, currently I'm fine, you know, financially I'm fine till May of next year. I mean, this is the thing about comedy though, is literally like there's no job security for anybody ever, because my tour is currently in until the end of April next year. Beyond that, I don't have any income potentially ever again from comedy. Right now, obviously that's unlikely, but that sort of stalks you a bit. But for somebody like me that was actually, you know, before I started doing comedy, quite a procrastinator and somebody that would coast, maybe that's a good thing. Maybe that's the kick up the arse I need. It's the idea that I always have to be doing something.
But it's interesting because I was watching the Michael Barrymore documentary over the weekend on Channel 5, and it's his legacy and the rising. And I'm not talking about everything that happened, you know, with the death and whatnot, but the fact that it was 1982, he did the Royal Variety, as you say, and he got given Strike It Lucky straight away because of that. And he had all these shows, and yet the bigger he was, the more demons came out. And I've met a lot of comedians over the past couple of years, and it's always interesting when you talk to them about mental health. And yes, you're on the road a lot. You're in your own company. You love your own company, being in the car, driving up and down. But there's something around the idea of being a comedian, the validation you get on stage, the fact that you get on stage and you're loving life, but all you also want to do is go back to your dressing room and just be introverted again. And there's that argument in your head between being introvert and extrovert. And I suppose the question is, like, now how comfortable you are in your own skin, that you don't have to worry about what's going to happen in April, because work is work, but also it's loving yourself, that you don't need that validation to be on that stage for that, because not for the money, but just for the validation.
I think I've got better at that, like, dichotomy between the gig going well. I just sort of think that having really good tour shows is what I'm supposed to do. That's my job, you know. So I don't, you know, when at the end, if people are cheering and it's gone particularly well, I just nod, you know, like somebody that's built a brick wall. You think, right, that I'm a brickie. That's what I do. I don't like surf the wave. You know, there'll probably be these days a handful of gigs a year where you do get that for like you, where you think, wow, that was real something else. You know, real sort of Hall of Fame type gig from my stuff. But yeah, I don't have the demons perhaps as bad as some comics. You know, I do, as you say, enjoy my own company. There's loads of great podcasts now. I mean, that has helped. Trust me, for comics driving around here, there, and everywhere. But, you know, the last 4 weeks are a good example of when it can be challenging. I've sort of had several successive weeks of where I've been on the road 3 to 4 days a week. And, you know, I was just in Scotland, and every day I had to get up, leave the hotel, get to another city, check in, you know, and it dragged me down, you know. But when I looked at myself yesterday morning going to Dundee Airport, I just looked like a guy that had been on the road, you know, for 3 or 4 days. And I was starting to feel lonely. You know, I was, you know, calling my wife a lot more and missing out on the life of the house, and, you know, and all that kind of thing. I think that in an ideal world as a comic, you know, doing a weekend away every couple of weeks, it kind of works quite well. You get a bit of hotel time on your own, your missus gets a bit of time without you there. But when it becomes successive weeks, as it has been in the last few weeks, yeah, I must admit it's I've struggled a bit.
Well, yeah, but the only problem with that, the reason you're on the road so much, because you went to the wrong airport. If you'd gone to the right airport, you wouldn't have had that issue.
Well, yeah. Well, this is it. I mean, yeah, I was supposed to be going to Gatwick. I went to Luton and I ended up having to spend another 250 quid to go from Heathrow. And then on the way back, I went to Dundee Airport, which I don't know if anybody's been, but I was blagged by one of the taxi drivers who said to me, "Oh yeah, you can do a bit of Christmas shopping there." I swear to God, it's about the size of a doctor's waiting room. Like it really, it's one of the smallest things I've ever seen. I think the staff sort of essentially they check you in, and then they run around the other side to do the security searches. There was one. I checked the live departures board, and there was one flight out and one in all day. And I kept like trying to scroll and so, I've hit some filter here. That was it. And yeah, you can feel really remote, you know, like where you know Dundee is a big city and stuff like that, but I was staying a bit outside of it, and just geographically sometimes, just where you are in the world. Some comics, I mean, they'll do like 4 or 5 tour shows in a week. I think that's not for me. I'm not that guy. You know, I need to recharge and be in my space for a while. But you know, a lot of the time, comics maybe once upon a time they might have gigged Thursday to Saturday or Thursday to Sunday, and then Monday, Tuesday they'd be kicking their heels. Like, you know, today I'm doing my podcast, I'm doing your podcast. That's part of the job now. And who knows, maybe less time to be introverted or just obsess about stuff. Maybe that it gives as much as it takes.
To wrap it up, there's an anecdote on page 215 about Harry and Meghan, and thank God you're not doing the normal Harry and Meghan debate, but it's really interesting the way you look at them, and I suppose that kind of accumulates basically everything we've spoken about today. So can you take me through that anecdote, please?
I was trying to work out why the British public were so obsessed one way or the other about Harry and Meghan, and I kind of thought that they represented a template in a way for a certain kind of relationship. Where first up, the guy is punching, you know, on a looks level. Like she, you know, she's a 9, he's a 6. And, you know, it's harsh to put numbers on it. 6 for a ginger is a good number. And I know that is not right to say these days, but it's union rules. I'm a stand-up comic. I had to make a ginger joke at that point. Otherwise, I'd be disbarred. And then what happens to him and is that when it's more one way than the other, you know, you could see that he was besotted with her. You just sort of felt that there was a guy there that had perhaps sort of lost some of himself in the course of a relationship. I know that often girls will say that happens with them, you know, suddenly the girl's going to football with him. But I do think it happens the other way. And then, you know, on the one level, maybe he didn't want to be in Apache helicopters shooting people and stuff like that. But maybe suddenly becoming like a crusader for like, you know, carbon emissions and stuff. It's such a wild kind of shift that it's almost like, in a broader sense, society is the family. And you're the family going, well, he's changed a lot in a short space of time in and around this relationship. How much is this just who he really is? Or how much of it is him being kind of, not manipulated is the wrong word, but that he's just gone right over to the other side of where his bread's buttered. And I sort of said that, you know, maybe the thing is we all know a Harry in our relation, you know, our mates, where he was a bit of a laugh, he's coming out, and then suddenly met this one girl, and then he's like super serious. You see him come down the pub. She's restyled him. You know, he's kind of like wearing a turtleneck and he's wearing chinos, and you're thinking, who is this guy, right? Who is this guy? And that I think is just, it's alarming in any situation when somebody fundamentally changes as a result of being in a relationship. Like I got a mate who suddenly got this girl who's a vegan. All of a sudden he's a vegan. But, you know, there are these rumours in the friendship group that there are late night runs to a KFC drive-through. There have been rumours, you know. So and that's the point. You go, have you really changed, or are you doing it for a quiet life? And we will all know blokes, right? People listen to this, you know, even if they're very feminist or whatever, very right on, you'll be able to think of blokes that just do it for a quiet life. And I suppose it's still their responsibility. I'm not saying, like, I'm not attacking Meghan. I'm saying, Harry, is this who you are? Or whether you've got a friend like that, is this who you are? And if it's not, then you've got to have the balls to actually be who you really are in the context of this relationship. Because if that person loves you, they would accept that.
Well, obviously, Harry, if you're watching or listening to Skinny, come and answer Geoff and come on and be a guest. Final question. Most of the people I have on this podcast are normally reality stars. You've not done much reality TV in your lifetime. Have you been offered gigs and you've turned them down, or it's not something that you want to be doing?
I've never done any reality telly. When Big Brother first started, I used to have a recurring nightmare about being in the Big Brother house and being voted out second, because I always felt like second was the worst. If you got voted out first, it was like, wow, you really like wound people up, you know, and you get the exit interview. But I'm not at a profile where the Jungle or Strictly would ever come for me, but equally, I could never do stuff like that, because just the fear of like, you know, like having to be on all day long and just people see it. People would just think I was a miserable bastard, but that would only be because, you know, a lot of the day I'd just be conserving energy and just sitting there. You know, when you see like these people I love I'm a Celebrity, by the way. I really do love these shows. But when they come up with like a song like, oh, you're going to get the stars, and you could just see a couple of people that just do not want to be involved in that. Like they just clearly like, but they don't want to be seen as a killjoy. The face that you'd see on me when I was pretending to have a good time would just be an awful thing to behold. So I've got nothing but respect for people that do go on these shows, but there is no reality show that I would do. I'd rather go back to supply tea.
Geoff, your book, The British Bloke Decoded, is out to go and buy now. Please do go and buy it. It's such a good book. I really enjoyed it. Thank you to Geoff for speaking to me on Skinny and Scared, the podcast. If you like what you heard or what you watched, then please leave a 5-star rating, click that subscribe button and leave a review. And let's keep spreading the word. It's okay to not be okay. On social media, on TikTok at Johnny Seifert 92, on Instagram at Johnny Seifert at Skinny and Scared podcast, and on X at Johnny Seifert. Go and check me out. I put teasers of all the episodes out there so we can keep spreading the word. It's okay to not be okay. I'm Johnny Seifert. Thanks so much for listening or watching. Until next time, thank you and goodbye.